is going to be part 2 of the Winchester Model 88 video. Normally, I tell you that all your guns, when you take them apart, they go back together exactly the way they came apart. But in this case, it's a little bit trickier, so we're going to actually do a reassembly video for this. This is part 2. So, let's start off with your trigger and hammer assembly. This is where your first slave pin is going to come in handy. Alright. What I like to do for these little springs to make sure they stay in place is I'll dip them in a little bit of grease and stick them in the hole. That way they don't fall out. You take your first slave pin, which you're going to make it to be exactly the same diameter as your trigger pivot pin right there. You take your little trigger spring, stick it back in the hole, take your disconnector, realign them just like this. Pinch them together, put your first slave pin in. Now, your slave pin should be no wider than the outside diameter of the two holes here, outside diameter. In other words, it shouldn't stick out past the sides of the part right here. You'll take your trigger pin, slide your trigger and your disconnector assembly back inside. Okay, you line that up, then you drive your slave pin out with your original pin. Save your slave pin. You see your trigger and disconnector is back in place. You take your little plunger part. You'll notice there's two bevels on that. Here's where your second slave pin is going to come in awful handy. Make sure your bevel lines up and down like that. Slide that back inside. This is always fun because now you get to wrestle against the spring tension. And what you want to do is you want to line these two holes up and put your slave pin in. Now your trigger and your hammer is back in place. In order to get this back in the gun, your hammer has to be locked into the disconnector. Just like that. Set that off to the side and we'll put the bolt back in. If you'll notice on the bolt right here, you pull back and forth on these little things and your bolt turns off these little legs right here. You notice that little pin, the head of that sticks up. If you look on the inside, left-hand side of the receiver, see if I can show you that groove. There's a little groove that runs the length of it right in here, on the left-hand side. So when you go to put this bolt back in, go ahead and get it started. What I like to do is hold this in place with my index finger, pull back on these two legs right here until you get that pin head lined up in that slot. Start it forward a little ways. Now the bolt's going to have a tendency to want to cock off to the side, so what I'm going to tell you to do is just lift those up, just like that. Now let's get the rear part of this locking mechanism lined up. Now, if you'll recall these two toggles, I told you there's a left side and a right side. If you remember from the first video, I'm going to tell you again anyway. In the first video, you'll notice you got a bevel on the outside edge, and the L shape runs like this. Okay, this is going to be on the left-hand side. This one is going to be on the right-hand side. Notice the bevel here. The bevels face outward. Here's where your third slave pin comes in handy. Okay, notice I got a little bit of grease holding that spring in place. Slide these two back together. The long leg of it right here goes in between the two pieces right there. Line all your holes up, start your slave pin. Oop, pushed it in a little too far. Let's back that out just a little. Okay. Now for your left-handed side, like I said, the long side goes into the back here, The big hump faces up, and this is the way the L shape should face. Slide that in there. Okay, now your toggles are all back in place. The next thing you're going to do, you'll notice there's two little tips that stick out on either side right here. That's what goes in these little slots. So you put one in and get the other one in. There's how your lever and your toggles fit together. Now, when you get this thing back together, you want to slide this all the way to the back, and you'll notice these two little holes here stick out to the front. Okay, you're going to have a tip here on the inside of this and a tip here on that. That's where these like to live. So just hook one right here. Hook the other one right there. And you're back to this point right here with your gun now. So you slide your bolt forward, work this back up, back inside the mechanism. We're going to put your original pin back in here first. Now, sometimes these things can be a little bit tricky, so what I like to do is I'll take and just lightly dress the edge and put a slight bevel on them. Helps get everything lined up and driven back into place. There's your first slate pin out. Then what you'll do is you'll line up the lever here with the other hole so you can drive the other slave pin out. Without using a slave pin, you are not going to get this gun back together. And like I said, just put a slight little bevel on the edge. Makes things a lot simpler. There's your third and final slave pin. What we're going to do now is just you'll notice on this little block right here, you got a couple of little pieces that stick out. That just slides right into here. It just dovetails into place. A little trick I like to use when I'm putting screws in like that, I'll actually turn it back until I feel it catch before I try going forward. It kind of prevents you from cross-threading and stripping. You don't want to mess those threads up. When I got the gun back together, before I put it back in the stock, I'm going to check it for function. Yep, everything seems to be working pretty good. Now is usually the time I put a little bit of gun oil in. Doesn't take a lot. You don't have to give it a bath in it. The reason I always wait till I get the gun mostly back together like this is because the parts are a little bit slippery and hard to handle. So, let's put him back in the stock. Just like on the Winchester 100, open the action. Hook it on the rear lug, pull it up, close your action. Last screw right in place. Here's your Winchester Model 88 lever action. This one's in 308, made in 1957 according to the serial number. And this is the gun after it's been completely stripped, given a good cleaning, and finally reassembled. Thank you for watching this latest Gunworks video. Down East Gunworks is a full-service firearm repair service for all your long guns and handguns that includes a high-tech machine shop for tooling obsolete parts. Old or new, if you have a firearm that needs attention, Gunworks can probably fix it, solve it, coat it, and make it work. If you're living in Down East Maine, come by the shop for a visit. We're located on Route 1 in Harrington. If you live elsewhere, you can reach us by going to the website www.downeastgunworks.com or call in the shop at area code 207-483-2175. If you found this video helpful or interesting, please leave me a comment and rate the video. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll always know when I've posted something new. And thanks again for watching.